of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Jodhpur. She received a PhD from Aarhus University, Denmark, with a dissertation about revival movements and identity projects centered on the sari in urban India. She has published a research in Journal of Material Culture in South Asia, Journal of South Asian Studies, and is currently working on a monograph about the modern sari. She has also written op-eds and articles for popular audiences in The Hindu and Garland magazine, a partner of World Crafts Council. Her research interests include visual and material culture, gender, South Asia, craft, identity politics, and sustainability. She will be delivering a talk titled Strong Not Skinny, Gender, Body, and Community on Instagram. This working paper examines recreational strength training communities that have mushroomed online for women on Instagram vis-a-vis other performance-oriented subcultures of the body, such as running and CrossFit. Through an analysis of the bodily practices of strength trainers and the communicative possibilities of Instagram, she suggests that these communities cultivate an aesthetic of accomplishment as opposed to an aesthetic of suffering, enabling a normalization of alternate displays of female bodies. Instagram is a site where new forms of speciality intersect with bodily practices, is a rich field to investigate how gendered, classed, and aestheticized bodies are produced, performed, and displayed. A gentle reminder for all participants to remain muted through the lecture. Please change your layout of the screen to focus or stage through the button on the top right corner of your screen for better experience. Post the talk, participants can raise their hands and our team members will
Yashita, you got cut off. Okay.
All right, shall I begin?
Just a second, ma'am. Just general instructions to all the participants to remain muted through the lecture. Please change your layout of the screen to focus the stage through the button on the top right corner of your screen for better experience. Post the talk, participants can raise hands and our team members will recognize you to ask questions. You can also put these questions in the chat box. The talk will be recorded for archival purposes. Use of derogatory and offensive language will attract strict action. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Kamya Sharma.
Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank the student organizers of the annual conference at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Madras, and particularly Professor Merin and Professor Jyotirmay and everyone else at the department for having me as the keynote speaker at this year's conference. As an alumnus of the MA program, I remember sitting in the darkened hall at ICNSR listening to David Schulman speak and feeling excited about all these possibilities of academic engagement. So it is an absolute honor to be invited to speak at this year's conference, and I thank you for that. The conference is themed on spatiality, and well, I thought it would be interesting to talk about uh, a specific aspect of virtual space, Instagram, given the salience it has acquired in our lives over the past year. So I will be alternatively reading from my working paper and speaking while I show you some visuals. Before I begin, I would like to say that this paper is strongly informed by my own embodied experiences with strength training, which I began in 2018 and have been practicing intermittently for the last 4 years. While this paper is not an autoethnography, but a visual and cultural analysis of the intersections of gender, strength training, and strength communities on Instagram, it is influenced by the deep and formative impact that strength training as a bodily discipline has had on me. I'm now about to share my screen, so please let me know if it is visible. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Akshat. In the first part part of this lecture, I will briefly historicize strength in the modern era and the gendering of visual displays of strength, followed by a discussion on embodied habitus, class, identity, and the body in pain. In my third section, I will draw on theories of image making on social media and also do a comparative analysis of strength training vis-a-vis performance-oriented subcultures of the body, especially CrossFit, and with some thoughts about running. I will conclude with some thoughts about strength training as a health-seeking practice among women. Notwithstanding the fact that life prior to the birth of the modern convenience industry was at least as physically arduous for women as it was for men, strength as a physical, affective, and performative trope of the body has historically been associated with men. Scholars have noted that in the wake of the Industrial Revolution, the association of the home with leisure, with non-work, and domesticity, accompanied by a number of technological advances ranging from modern plumbing, air conditioning to refrigeration, have created the infrastructures of comfort in contemporary urban life. Many of these additions to the conveniences of contemporary life are of relatively recent origin. The sociologist and practice theorist Elizabeth Schaff notes that as recently as the aftermath of the Second World War, it was quite uncommon for people in England to bathe more than once a week. Historically then, human lives up until the middle of the 20th century have relied heavily on bodily strength and endurance. With shifts in ways of life, men have sought to redefine masculinity through practices such as lifting weights, engaging in martial arts, or other sports and forms of bodily discipline. For a while, however, women were either did not or were discouraged from engaging in physical pursuits relating to the acquisition of strength. Today, a growing number of women who train with weights are changing the status quo in the pursuit of strength. The question remains, how is femininity and the female body reimagined and comprehended in this new paradigm? A cursory examination of the history of strength sports tells us much about perceptions of strength in female bodies. The 19th century saw the global emergence of an exhibitionary complex and a visual culture where the public were increasingly encouraged to participate in the witnessing of spectacular displays. The more bizarre, the more exotic, the better. The consequences of this culture of the spectacle have been exposed in various arenas relating, for instance, to the organization of leisure time through amusement parks, for example, or the display and racist othering of bodies that were considered exceptional, such as, for instance, the Hottentot Venus, and the assimilation of various articles that were considered rare, varied, or exotic into display and spectacle. For instance, cabinets of curiosity, such as the Great Athelda in England and Visitor Lears. I hope you can see the visuals here. In Germany in the early 20th century were part of this culture of spectacular display. Their association with acrobatics, music hall, and circus entourages suggests also that female strength was embedded deeply in cultures of performance, a testament to how female displays of strength and musculature were exceptionalized, treated as superhuman or freakish or extraordinary, while female ideals of slenderness, delicacy, and frailty in the 20th century were confined to the wealthy upper classes. There is a long-standing association of muscled bodies with working-class cultures. Musculature is ideally regulated and contained in classed bodies. Even for men, studies document that muscled bodies obtained as a result of weight training are perceived as less than, worthless, and related to a lack of intelligence. Pierre Bourdieu, in his definition, notes how the pursuit of bodily disciplines are heavily class belonging. Thus, the upper class preference for sports such as tennis and a lean, lithe, and athletic physique, whereas strength and its raw displays are associated with laborers and working class culture. Often, upper class sensibilities considered heavily muscled bodies to be tacky or unregulated, excessive. Mike's musculature contains a derogatory association with redneck culture or African American culture. In the gendering of bodily norms, such perceptions are heightened where women are concerned. In the next section, I'm going to draw on some theories that have engaged with the body in pain or the suffering body, since my talk and the arguments that I make in this paper are significantly related to the aesthetic of strength. Noted anthropologist first used the word habitus in the 1930s to suggest his intended audience of psychologists seemingly naturalized techniques of human bodies are in fact the result of cultural socialization. Bourdieu, again, returning to Pierre Bourdieu, the famous French sociologist, extended this semantic habitus by arguing that it is a set of durable positions that are embedded in persons and reveal where speed lies. Habitus is a way to, and as the sociologist Roberta Sassatelli notes, quoting her, embodiment as something preceding consciousness without having to resort to biological essentialisms. Amongst the various fields, the most salient to Bourdieu's discussion is social class. That is, amongst the various fields that organize our social lives, class is one that is particularly salient to Bourdieu's discussion, drawn from his own interest in the middle classes as drivers of markets and consumption. So distinction is actually a study essentially of the middle and upper middle classes in France. Class habitus, he further delineated rather famously in terms of economic and cultural capital. So cultural capital as a concept became a means for scholars to discuss all of the intangible aspects of social life through which human beings accumulate and assert value. To this, Loic Wacon, again a noted sociologist and ethnographer, who conducted a very fascinating ethnography and also, I should say, autoethnography, because he was also an active participant in this community which he studied. So his ethnography of boxing communities in Chicago added the concept of body capital, an approach that allowed scholars to active bodily discipline are socialized into habitus. But this concept of the habitus has been critiqued for unwittingly reproducing dualisms, that is, Cartesian dualisms of mind and body, for also creating an entirely hierarchical and deterministic logic of the acquisition and display of tastes, and for failing to adequately locate drivers of human action. In other words, the question of agency. I am in agreement with aspects of this critique because Bourdieu's theories are ahistorical, often treating habitus as a complete, finished, and eternal apparatus, and also inadequate to explain how tastes travel and transform between social classes, forming and reforming the habitus of different social groups as a result. One such example, which I will discuss in greater detail in this paper, is that of the evolution of CrossFit from being a particularly masculine bodily discipline to one that is inclusive of gender but not of socioeconomic class. Regardless, Bourdieu's and Wacon's theories are useful in understanding how actors create, assert, and link perceptible and imperceptible forms of value in their social lives. An alternative to Bourdieu's approach has also been identified in New Realist philosophy to encompass both biological and sociocultural causalities as accruing to two sides of human agency: natural, biologically present powers and powers acquired through social activities. Similarly, research in the field of geography, human geography, is today concerned with embodied research, that is, gaining research insights through bodily experience. Particular attention in this field of research is given to the haptic, somatic, and kinesthetic experiences of the body. This concept of the habitus, again, argument, strength training represents a departure from other forms of bodily discipline. Suffering, I shall focus on theories of the suffering body or the body in pain. Elaine Scarry published The Body in Pain in 1985, a book which has since attained canonical status for its arguments about the radical subjectivity of pain and its fundamental incommunicability. The idea that pain is ultimately very subjective and fundamentally incommunicable, rendering its victims often mute or incoherent, unable to verbalize or communicate what they are feeling, especially when examined in the context of war and torture. What interests me, however, is Rajeshwari Sundararajan's critique of Scarry's theory in her collection of essays, Real and Imagined Women. Sundararajan states that Scarry's The Body in Pain exposes the limits of Western theory and its fundamental Eurocentrism by creating others out of victims, arguing that the subjectivity of pain is in fact representable and is indeed represented in textual and visual discourses. Sundararajan uses the example of stylized depictions of the writhing, burning body of the female sati to demonstrate the representability of the subjectivity of pain. This example is especially salient to my argument here because sati was a custom practiced primarily by elite communities who could afford to sacrifice women of childbearing age in times when human life was fragile and precarious. In talking about bodily suffering and bodies in suffering, it is also useful to examine the spectacular dimensions of bodily suffering, where scholars have noted that the body itself becomes a political communicative tool in the fields of performance or political protest, for instance, and a medium for public consumption. Recreational running or CrossFit in many ways represent a subversion of this by commodifying suffering and presenting it in the rhetoric of individual choice as a means of earning your accomplishments. This, I suggest, informs the aesthetic of suffering, which is intrinsic to visual and discursive representations of bodily disciplines such as running and CrossFit. Before I delve into my analysis of CrossFit vis-a-vis strength training and how they are part of these visual cultures of display and community formation on Instagram, I also briefly discuss theories of image making on social media and its implications for the communication possibilities of Instagram. In chronicling the effects of television and radio in life and culture, Jean Baudrillard, the famous postmodern theorist, argued that they enable a collapse of the distinctions between spectator and spectacle due to what he termed the ecstasy of communication. Baudrillard was referring to the advent of the television as a technological event that collapsed these boundaries, resulting instead in a world space where spectacle was woven into all the interstices of our lives. Spectacle overwhelms and is obscene in its presence and intensity in our lives. The word obscene here is used in multiple senses of the word, but scholars have used obscene to characterize the very excess of visibility itself, which is typical of many visual social media apps. Baudrillard wrote that the obscenity of our culture resides in the confusion of desire and its equivalent materialized in the image, not only for sexual desire, but in the desire for knowledge and its equivalent materialized in information. Roland Barthes cautions similarly against the overwhelming power of the photograph. One of the marks is perhaps this reversal, he says. We live generalized image repertoire. Pleasure is through the image. Here is a great mutation. The postmodern theorists thus demonstrate considerable wariness towards visual technologies and are skeptical of its seeming emancipatory potentials. But another less dystopian way to look at social media, especially apps such as Instagram, is to examine them as a genre whose evolving and changing features enable specific forms of communication. Stina Lornborg, a media studies scholar, suggests just this in her analysis of Facebook. So she looks at different social media platforms as forming different genres of communication and enabling different kinds of community formation through these forms of communication. Instagram, ever since its advent, has been most striking in its visuality. A visuality that seems excessive even of reality through the possibilities of high definition images and image augmentation or alteration features. In his iconic work, Camera Indica, pioneering in its effort to theorize the photograph, Roland Barthes characterized the photograph as an image without code, an index that references a thing while aspiring to be a sign. The photographic referent is that which has been in this case. The image is proof that something existed, a means of authenticating a narrative. Thus, the photograph does not necessarily say what is no longer, but only for certain what has been. The photograph's essence is to ratify what it represents. As an image without code, the photograph confers meaning not on the object, since it can be decoded in multiple ways, but on time itself. However, with the advent of smartphones equipped with cameras, the photograph's relationship with its referent and time are altered. Doan writes of the digital image's potential to abstract and isolate itself, severing any connection with an autonomous reality. Brooke Knight's analysis of camera reveal how, quote, the smartphone shortens the distance between snapping and sharing, and therefore encourages the taking of more images and heightening the performative aspects of image making. Snapping and sharing as a photographic practice alters the very nature of image making, in other words, to a degree that a digital image is as much produced and performed reality as it is an authentication of what has been. While Barthes conceives of the photograph as death because it shows what has been, though not necessarily what is no longer, Knight demonstrates that the shared cell phone image has altered this relationship to show what is there now, such that shared immediately images become signs of being, of agency, of performativity. Similarly, Dong-Hu Lee uses Walter Ong's notions of primary and secondary orality to understand digital everyday communication today, characterizing camera phone pictures as a form of tertiary orality. Lee presents photographs as requiring contexts to anchor their meaning. If primary orality is the immediacy of speech and participation, secondary orality is electronic media such as radio and television that have followed and passed through print culture, but are nevertheless similar to primary orality in their evocation of immediacy, spontaneity, situatedness, and a sense of presence. Tertiary orality, as presented by social media, rests on the following communication modes in Lee's analysis. 1. Words presented in multimodal form through the combination of sound, text, and image. 2. Synchronicity and situatedness in the here and now due to the technological features of smartphones. 3. Co-presence of the addresser and addressee in the communication. Photographic practices have become more closely to modes of distribution and sharing on social media. Similarly, the platinity with dialogue interaction on social results for developing virtual spaces resulting in a dissolution of boundaries between the real self, mediated self, and social self because of the intersubjectivities engendered by the internalization of the virtual other even at the time of image production. So, provided the possibilities of Instagram as a medium, I am now going to come up with performance-oriented subcultures of the body, for instance, CrossFit. Can you see the next slide? Can someone, if you're able to see the slide?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is this is actually a parody of CrossFit, and in some ways what it signifies to proponents of other subcultures of bodily disciplines. I will explain this image in greater detail in a little bit. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with CrossFit, so I'm going to provide a kind of brief history of the evolution of CrossFit. CrossFit has its origins in the late 1990s in a set of fitness activities initiated by a group of ex-firemen and ex-Marines. Marines are typically predominantly white and poor in the American context, thus conforming to very high standards of fitness. CrossFit's increasing commercialization over the years has moved it away from its associations with working class masculinity, exemplified through WODs or workouts of the day, which are often named after, quote, heroes or the girls. So, for instance, doing a Fran is the name of a workout of the day, WOD. So, doing a Fran are ways in which workouts are discussed and termed and defined in the CrossFit culture. So CrossFit's increasing commercialization over the years has moved it away from its associations with working class masculinity towards adopting a more inclusive idiom and ethos in recognition of the growing market of, for instance, women patrons. Despite its popularity and its becoming emblematic of a certain paradigm of fitness, CrossFit has received little academic attention outside the discipline of sports science. CrossFit has been documented as a bodily practice oriented around the cultivation of group activities and community, and has also been criticized for causing high rates of injury and what is termed exertional rhabdomyolysis, a possible life-threatening breakdown of muscle from extreme exertion, especially when compared to more traditional forms of weightlifting and strength training. But most pertinent to the arguments in my paper are Matt Crockett's ethnography of the spatial and social organization of CrossFit gyms in San Francisco. In this ethnographic study, he makes the following observations, and I quote him here. CrossFit is a place that blurs the line between exercise and menial labor in an otherwise sedentary and technologized society. A place that is inclusive specifically in terms of gender, age, and ability, yet exclusive socioeconomic, and a for elite sporting place that inadvertently produces wild and untamed bodily movements. So, just to clarify, CrossFit is today a very expensive form of bodily discipline to access. So, it is often not available for or accessible for members of communities, and CrossFit adopts a kind of boot camp attitude towards work, towards bodily practice, towards the pursuit of physical fitness. So that's what it is blurring the line between exercise and meaning labor. The comparison in this paper between CrossFit is salient because of CrossFit's popularity of college-educated women, which is proof of its gender inclusivity as well as of its being part of a certain class habitus. Roberto Sassatelli, the sociologist who has studied fitness culture and the proliferation of gyms in Italy in the Italian context, has argued that gyms represent a spatial logic for the organization of leisure time into specific bodily activities as forms of self-improvement. Furthermore, she states that the growing popularity of gyms amongst college-educated women and women of this particular socioeconomic class implies their willingness to expend their leisure time in acquiring quote-unquote desirable bodies. CrossFit witnessed a split after its inception years as some of its practitioners broke off to form part of the contemporary strength training community. Even as CrossFit sheds its working class trappings in embracing a more posh and inclusive aesthetic and messaging, reminders of its origins keep popping up. So, the person who is considered one of the founders of CrossFit today, Greg Glassman, has always been controversial for coming out in vocal support of former President Trump, and was made to resign last year. He had to resign last year after he was seen to make some very unsavory remarks in the wake of the death of George Floyd. So, in this sense, these things demonstrate sort of CrossFit's working class origins. Although it has transformed and become a very commercialized today, which is primarily something patronized by college educated people. Although CrossFit demonstrates a preoccupation with strength cutting across gender lines, I suggest that it is a space where suffering is fetishized and aestheticized, especially given its patronage by members of the privileged classes. The popularity of dietary practices such as paleo and gluten-free diets amongst CrossFit patrons is also indicative of its class habitus. Suffering is explicitly coded into the practices of CrossFit and something actively sought by its practitioners. Returning to Crockett's observation that CrossFit blurs the line between exercise and menial labor in a sedentary and technologized society where convenience is the governing logic, CrossFit's punishing physical regimen is designed to appeal to those who would like to earn a particular kind of body. So, earning a particular kind of body is also emblematic of the aesthetic of suffering, which I talk about. CrossFit communities consider it a badge of honor to puke after a particularly intensive workout, drawing a direct correlation between bodily suffering and bodily worth. So that idea of being a badge of honor to actually throw up because of your workout is something that is being parodied in this visual here. I find it particularly funny that his shorts say pukey, which is also a parody of, well, the growing commercial CrossFit, its association with other brands. Hashtags like hashtag blood and hashtag sweat are typical to CrossFit workouts, deepening the connection between the aesthetic of suffering and bodily practice. This aesthetic of suffering does not given that CrossFit routines are typically long and long-winded. They are not suited for the fleeting attention spans of the scrolling Instagram user who is typically attuned to watching short videos about 30 seconds long. So at this point, I'd like to show you an example of a CrossFit workout to sort of demonstrate what I'm talking about here. It's kind of fundamental unsuitability for this creating this kind of participatory visual culture, which Instagram very much exemplifies. So give me a second while I pull up the video. Okay, so there is no audio to this video. I'm about to play it. If you are able to view it. If you're able to view the video.
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Hi, we can see the video, but it's sort of irregular. But it's
Okay.
largely okay, so it's fine.
Okay. Just a second. I'm sorting out some internet issues. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay, great. I'm really sorry for that interruption. There were just some minor connection issues on my side. Hopefully, they should be sorted out.
Yes, ma'am, it's okay.
So, I think we're close to the end of that video. Let me just finish playing the video and then I will continue speaking.
Okay.
Okay, so I hope you all were able to see that video through to the end. My my intention in showing you that video was to also sort of show you the tediousness of a typical CrossFit workout, which is very high repetition. You can also see evidence of the wild and untamed movements that Matt Crockett is talking about in that particular workout. But especially, I wish to emphasize the unsuitability of this kind of workout for the visual culture of Instagram. This is not something that is likely to retain the scrolling Instagram user's attention. Your eyes will inevitably glaze over after a certain point as you lapse into some kind of boredom. So this aesthetic of suffering, and I think you can very much see how difficult and how arduous this particular workout is, and how much it is also oriented around this suffering. So this aesthetic of suffering does not lend itself easily to modes of visual display on Instagram, especially given that CrossFit routines are typically long and long-winded. They're not suited for the fleeting attention spans of the scrolling Instagram user who's typically attuned to watching short videos about 30 seconds long. So in this sense, it parallels running in that the immediacy of the movement is often difficult to share on Instagram. If you can see the slide that I have just shared, so this is, I think, emblematic of or very typical of the kind of running or the kind of running related memory or a moment that one finds on Instagram. The immediacy of the movement itself is not something very often that is shareable on this kind of visual social media platform. In contrast, subcultures of strength training, particularly powerlifting, lend themselves to the immediacy, planned spontaneity, and brevity of Instagram's visual culture. Unlike running, lifting allows for both the spectacular and visceral aspects of this kind of display. In other words, viewers can both see the lifter and participate in the immediacy of the lifting. Lifters short clips of heavy loaded squat or pushing the movement. Sometimes they clips of where they are to complete the movement. By positioning the strategy, women's explosive movement that is effective at communicating accomplishment in its raw immediacy. This, I suggest, creates an aesthetic of accomplishment where the community allows viewers to participate euphoric movement.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, ma'am, but I think you're completely breaking off. I'm so sorry to interrupt. Can you hear me? Do others have a problem, or is it only me?
It seems to be breaking off.
Can you hear me? Ma'am, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but if you can, I'm not able to hear you at all.
Now,
No, it's still very breaking.
okay, 1 second, please. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, ma'am, we can see your screen. But can you just say a few words? I'm not sure if we can hear you right.
Okay. So I am just about to show everyone some clips of women lifting on Instagram to exemplify the kind of thing that I'm talking about, the aesthetic of accomplishment. Was that clear?
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Perfect.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, and
Sorry-
I'm really sorry
sorry for
about
the-
the disruptions. Okay, I'm playing this clip now. Okay, so in this video, you saw the lifter do a squat, a bench press, and a deadlift. And you can see how short the clips were. So this is to contrast with the CrossFit workout, which I showed you earlier. So it is brief, it's explosive, it's got a kind of raw immediacy, and it allows the viewer to both see the lifter and participate in the euphoria of a successfully completed lift. I'm also going to show you now an example from the Indian context. This is a powerlifter who is based out of Mumbai. Just give me a second, please. Okay.
Are you speaking right now?
Yes, okay. If you can hear me now, I will continue reading from my paper.
Yes. Yes, we can
Okay,
hear you.
excellent. While strength in visual culture has often been displayed through ripped bodies, heavy, well-defined musculature, and quote-unquote looking strong, strength training creates an aesthetic of strength itself through displays of what the body is capable of accomplishing. There is no effort put into looking strong when not performing a movement that requires strength. CrossFit's emphasis on building strength does not translate to creating this aesthetic of strength. In fact, it often takes recourse to the display of muscle-dripped bodies in visualizing strength. Another amusing trope about CrossFit is very often you will see male CrossFit practitioners take off their t-shirts to show off their torsos, even in weather conditions that are not necessarily comfortable for that kind of stripping. And you will see similar kinds of practices being adopted by women who will wear their sports bras and train in extremely cold conditions, because in some ways they do take recourse to visualizing strength through displays of musculature. Furthermore, the decidedly unfeminine aspects of these movements also defies the general conventions of Instagram as a space where female bodies are eroticized and stylized. Here I'm talking about strength training. So to give you an example of how it can in some way defy the conventions of stylized and eroticized bodies, look at the face of this particular lifter. This is Steffi Cohen, who is also a world record holder. So women lifters openly discuss the effects of lifting in the chats, comments, and stories sections of Instagram, such as, for instance, inadvertently peeing a little during a particularly heavy deadlift. An ex-bodybuilder and world record holding powerlifter talks about her bodily cues for a deadlift as hold your farts in and hide your armpits. The grimacing, puffed up, and florid face of the female lifter is also part of the aesthetic of accomplishment, where strength is visualized and shared in an online community. In this sense, strength training also parallels yoga in the ways in which it is compatible with the communicative and visual features of Instagram, and in how one can showcase a successfully completed bodily movement. So I am now coming to the conclusion of my talk. Research in health now supports evidence of the benefits of strength training in combating lifestyle diseases, and more so for women who often suffer from hormonal dysfunction. The COVID-19 pandemic has made us re-examine the assumptions and practices which inform our approach to health and bodily risk. Emerging insights about the pandemic point to a strong likelihood of mortality being exacerbated by lifestyle-based diseases such as hypertension, diabetes, obesity, and such. It has also brought home the importance of understanding the impact that sociocultural norms have on people's health-saving practices. While strength training is part of a subculture that used to be associated with men, there is growing evidence that increasing numbers of women are active participants and proponents of this practice. How are perceptions of strength gendered? What sets of practices do women who train with weights embody? How does this affect women's body image? What implications does this hold for lifestyle-based decisions made by women? How do norms of beauty impact women who train with weights? These are all questions that this field of research raises. Extensive data collected by the National Family Health Survey in India from 2015 to 16 point to two significant factors in the question of women's health. Women are more prone to the lifestyle diseases of obesity and diabetes than men. Urban women are significantly more prone than rural women, which connects back to the beginning of my talk where I discussed, for instance, the emergence of the modern regimes of convenience and comfort. While lifestyle diseases such as diabetes, obesity, and PCOS have received more attention recently, especially in the field of medical anthropology, we have little scholarly understanding of strength training as a health-seeking practice sought by women to combat these conditions. Given prevalent discourses, especially amongst middle-class urban Indians, about modern convenience regimes replacing earlier, more labor-intensive forms of household work, how do women remedy this perceived lack? This is not taking into account other lifestyle conditions such as herniated discs, which is an increasingly prevalent issue amongst urban Indians. So just to demonstrate the sort of growing popularity of strength training as a health-seeking practice, I want to show you this particular image. This is from a handle I follow called Fitter with Squats, which makes unique use of this kind of before-after trope to demonstrate the physical, psychological, and kind of overall impact that strength training has on women. This handle is particularly interesting for its focus on women, its focus on female displays of strength, and also its focus on strength training as a healthy practice. Its specific use in combating lifestyle disorders ranging from anxiety and depression to PCOS, diabetes, thyroid issues, and so on. This paper, in line with previous philosophical and ethnographic explorations of the body and bodily cultures, has demonstrated to some extent that social class and class habitus determine people's perceptions and valuations of bodily strength. Strength also impacts the professions women are likely to pursue or find themselves proscribed from pursuing. For instance, only 1% of the construction industry in the UK comprises women, but in India, nearly 25% of the industry workforce comprises women. This suggests that India, especially, may be an interesting field site to female of strength training communities in India, especially amongst women. On that, So in the meantime, I have shown you this kind of visual and cultural communities as perform and do on Instagram. Instagram as a space which allows for forms of bodily practice and display otherwise proscribed in the public sphere shows growing evidence that more and more women are adopting strength training as a health-seeking practice. I have discussed how women and in strength training demonstrate the possibilities as a space for building community through the aesthetic of accomplishment as opposed to the aesthetic of suffering. Given how understanding of ideal bodies and body appropriate behavior, aesthetic of accomplishment offers an interesting alternative to the notion that suffering is integral to physical. With that, I've come to the end of my talk. I would like to show you one more clip very briefly. This is a clip that some of you may have already seen because it went viral during the pandemic last year. But I thought this clip would be which and please hold on while I line it up. Okay, so this is Milind Soman's mother, Usha Soman, doing 15 push-ups to celebrate her 81st birthday. This was in the news last year. So I think in this clip also exemplifies what I'm talking about. Female display as something that is being celebrated on Instagram, creating an aesthetic of strength and accomplishment in itself. On that note, I think I will stop. Thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry again for any disruptions because of internet issues. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
We will now be moving into the question answer session. Please remember to keep your questions and pointed. Each participant will be allowed one question. The speaker and the members of our organizing committee can choose to disallow any questions under their discretion. We now open the floor for questions. Please raise hands and the members of our team will recognize you.
Yes, Atreya, you should be able to.
Hello, ma'am. So,
Hi, hello.
Thank you for your lecture. I have a brief observation regarding it. You are specifically looking at Instagram as a social media platform, but there are a number of social media platforms like Facebook, and you seem to the kind of users that you seem to look at are homogenizing in the sense that they are scrollers and they look at 30-second videos or maximum 45-second videos. But we see over other social media platforms like Facebook, where people are engaging themselves in heated debates, and there are various types of users who perceive social media in different ways. So if you diversify your approach to including more social media platforms, what findings do you expect to this perspective of the visual display of accomplishment of strength that you put across to us? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. So I am specifically interested in Instagram because of its brevity and because of the fact that it captures a lot. It captures, well, sort of the overwhelming visuality of things in very brief spans of moments. But the other thing is also that this particular strength training community that I'm interested in examining, women's strength trainers, many of them are very active on Instagram. I'm unaware of whether they're that active on other social media platforms. So I'm sort of interested in examining this intersection between strength, displays of strength, embodiment, and social media. And I think in some ways Instagram is a kind of ideal space to examine that. But to sort of respond to your question also about other social media platforms. For instance, the CrossFit video that I showed you is taken from YouTube. And of course, YouTube in some ways does allow for longer attention spans. But I would still be very skeptical of someone who would pause, someone who is not a CrossFit practitioner themselves, pause and watch that 4-minute stretch of Pam just doing an innumerable number of CrossFit pull-ups. So yeah, so I do think that different social media apps and platforms allow for different genres and possibilities of communication. And in this paper, I'm specifically interested in Instagram.
Any other questions? Just wait for a couple of minutes for any other questions.
Akshat, while we wait for people to ask questions, there's also, I think, one more video that I would like to show people if it's
Sure,
not a
ma'am.
problem.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Definitely.
Okay, so I mean, this video also in some ways for me exemplifies the aesthetic of accomplishment. The idea that women are not necessarily interested in looking or embodying some kind of idealized femininity, that they're in some ways providing a space for alternate displays of female bodies. So I'll show you this particular video. Okay. All right. Okay. So see that.
Yes, ma'am, that was visible.
Excellent. So this particular lifter, she's just it's a very brief clip in which she shows a successfully completed movement, and the emphasis is entirely on the aesthetic of strength, or on a strength as demonstrated through what bodies can accomplish, what bodies can do, as opposed to how bodies well are muscled or ripped in particular ways.
If you don't mind, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So, firstly, thank you for the amazing lecture. Truly eye-opening for a lot of us, I believe. I have a question with regard to how this whole content that is going out is perceived. Do you think that the larger number of people consuming this content either are looking at transforming themselves into a specific physical into specific physical attributes, or do you think a larger part of the people who are interacting with this content are trying to kind of reach not a fitness goal, but just for the pleasure of completion of the workout, as you mentioned before?
Okay, thanks so much for this question. So I'm trying to figure out where and how to structure my answer, but to sort of begin responding, one thing is that a couple of the videos that I showed you, they are taken from the handles of lifters who are very well known, who have a significant number of followers. The image that I showed you of the woman with her face all puffed up in the middle of the movement, I told you she's a world record holder. She's a fairly well-known figure in the world of powerlifting. The people who are consuming this content, I think they are extremely diverse. I would not be able to say for sure because I have not really conducted an ethnography of these communities, but I would say that they're extremely diverse, ranging from a person with sort of a lay interest in body practices and body disciplines to people who are very, very committed and who have extremely technical conversations in the chats and comments about how they can improve this particular aspect of the deadlift or the squat, how they can maximize their performance in very specific ways. So I think I've seen sort of the entire range. The other handle that I was talking about, Fitter with Squats, towards the end, I think that one also has a very diverse following, because many people who are following handles like Fitter with Squats are just looking for some tips or suggestions, some ways in which they might well acquire better bodies, healthier bodies.
Right. Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions? Are there any other questions? Okay, there is a question in the chat. Are you able to see me?
Yes, this is Sushant asking,
Yeah.
do you feel technological determinism is making the present population more fitness freak? Well, this is, I don't think that apps, well, I don't know how to answer the larger question that you're asking, but I do think that apps such as Instagram do make people more body aware in some ways. And this is not necessarily linked to, earlier perceptions of body image. It goes beyond that, because which is also something that I'm trying to articulate in my paper, that it is not mere body image, because it's also about what bodies can be seen as capable of doing, which also applies, for instance, to yoga. Sometimes people will try and do fairly difficult poses, will try to do headstands. So it's also about the capabilities of the body which can be visually apprehended. So there is a new kind of cultural, visual, social awareness of the body being engendered on platforms or on social media apps like Instagram, but I'm not sure it's making people more obsessed with fitness. There's also a lot more information available now. There's been a democratization of that information in terms of dietary practices, bodily disciplines. There's a lot more that one can access online. Misinformation also, but yes.
We might have time for one more question before we close the talk. Okay, seeing that there are no questions, Yakshita.
Okay, if
Yeah,
there
sure.
are no other questions, that will, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
If there are no other questions, that will be. We're extremely grateful to Professor Kamya Sharma for gracing us with her presence and delivering this insightful talk. It was extra happiness to see one of our very own return and paving the way into academia for students of Ardement. Thank you so much, Professor Kamya, for your time today.